Hi crocheters, welcome to our second video in our Christmas in July crochet along. Today we're actually going to start crocheting and we are going to start on the head. So you're going to need your white yarn, your gray yarn, your nylon, your 8mm hook, and some fiber fill. So to get started, you're going to need your 8mm hook and your white super bulky yarn, or color A. You can be using white or cream or pink. It's really your choice. So we're going to get started on the head, and for that we're going to do a magic ring. So for the magic ring, you want to anchor your yarn on your ring finger, then wrap it around these two fingers like so that there's an X in the front and parallel lines in the back. Then you're going to insert your 8mm hook underneath the first one, grab the second and twist toward you. Then you're going to insert it underneath this strand, yarn over, and pull through. And so that is what creates our magic ring. So then what we're going to do is single crochet 6. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. So at the end of the row, you're just going to grab that yarn tail and you're going to pull it tight, closing up that ring and cinching it up, forming a circle. So I like to use a running stitch marker in my project. So I just use a piece of yarn that's of contrasting color and a lighter weight to mark the beginning and end of each row. So it just sits right here in between the beginning and end of the first row, and I crochet over it for the second row. So row 2, we're going to bobble stitch. So we're going to wrap the yarn around the hook, then insert into the next stitch, then yarn over and pull through, then yarn over and pull through these next 2 stitches. And we're going to do that again, where we're going to wrap the yarn around the hook, insert into that very same stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. Then one more time, wrap the yarn around the hook, insert it into the stitch, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2. So at this point, each project can kind of specify how many bobbles they want in their stitch. In this one we're doing 3, but some people can do like 4 or 5. It depends on how big you want it. So when we've got 4 loops on the hook, we're going to wrap the yarn around the hook and pull through all 3 of those loops. And what I do is I kind of put my middle finger in the center of that bobble on the back side. When I'm yarning over and pulling through all of the loops, that way the bobble sticks out. Oftentimes they want to poke in, like so, and that makes you crochet inside out, so you want to make sure that it's like that. So sometimes, because the stitch is so big, it covers up the next stitch, so you kind of have to pull it back a little bit so that you can find the next stitch and not lose stitches in your row. You also might have to feel a little bit for that second stitch. So then you're going to increase. So we've got 1 single crochet and then 2 single crochets for our increase. And then we're going to repeat that same pattern of the bobble and then the increasing stitch 2 more times for a total of 9 stitches at the end. Right, so it's our first one. Now we're wrap around, insert the hook, yarn over, pull through 2, and again. So again, you can see I'm putting my finger right there in the back, yarn over and pull through all of them, and that makes the bobble stick out. And pull the bobble stitch to the side and work the increasing stitch. I'll do that once more. So one of the things to notice on this stitch right after the bobble stitch is that sometimes you need to cinch it a little bit tighter because it can be a little bit gappy because that bobble stitch is so big compared to the normal like single crochet height. So that might be something you want to do so you don't have gaps in your project. So for row 3, we're going to increase 9 times. So that's pretty simple. We're just going to work an increasing stitch into each of the 9 stitches that we made in the last row. Then when you're at the end of row 3. So when you're at the end of row 3, you're going to take your running stitch marker and you're going to flip it forward so it marks the beginning of this next row. So row 4, we're going to bobble stitch and then increase. And we'll do that 9 times. So there's our bobble stitch, then increase. Give that that stitch right after it a tug, and we'll continue to work that pattern around the entire row. All right, so that's the end of row 4. One of the things you can do, it's always a good practice to count your stitches at the end of each row, but you can also count the bobbles to help you kind of make sure. So we've got 9 bobbles in our project, 9 bobbles count called for, so that's perfect. Row 5, we're going to single crochet 8. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then we'll do an increasing stitch. So 1 and 2 in the same stitch. And we'll do that 2 more times for a total of 30 stitches. So row 6, we're going to bobble and then single crochet 2. So up to this point we've been increasing after each of our bobble stitches, and we're not going to do that anymore for the head. We're just going to do single crochets after the bobble stitch. So got single crochet 1 and single crochet 2. So we'll do that for a total of 10 times. So we'll have 30 stitches at the end of the row. So for row 7, we're going to single crochet 4, 1, 2, crochet over that, 3 and 4, and then we're going to do an increasing stitch. So 1 and 2 worked in the same stitch. So we're going to do that for a total of 6 times, which will give us 36 stitches at the end of row 7. So row 8, we're going to bobble stitch. You get pretty fast at bobbles in this project. And then we're going to single crochet 2 and 2, And we'll do that for a total of 12 times. So we'll have 36 stitches at the end of the row. All right, row 9, we're going to single crochet 4 and then decrease. So we're starting to cut down on their number of stitches that we have. So that's 4 single crochets, and then for all of my decrease stitches, I like to do the invisible decrease, which means you work through only the front loop. So each single crochet has a front and back loop, and I feel with my fingers and I just lift right up and I insert the hook just underneath that very first loop of the first stitch, the first loop of the second stitch, then I yarn over and pull through both of those, then yarn over and pull through. And so what that does is it just collapses those 2 stitches into one. And I like it a little bit better than a normal decrease because it tends to be a little bit less gappy. So we'll do that again. So those are our 4 single crochets, and once again, and work those invisible decreases through those front loops. So I've got 1 and 2, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. And continue crocheting according to the pattern. All right, so row 10 is where we're going to start switching colors. So first we're going to stay with our A yarn, and we are going to bobble stitch, and 3, yarn over, pull through all of them, and single crochet 2, 1 and 2, and we're going to do that for a total of 3 times. And 1 and 2, and our third bobble stitch, and then single crochet 2, all right, then what we're going to do is we're going to do one more bobble stitch. And right here when we get to the end, instead of yarning over and pulling through all of these stitches like I normally would with the white yarn, I'm going to grab the color B yarn. In this case we're using pale gray, and I'm just going to pull that through. All right, so we're going to take our strand of pale gray or color B, and we're just going to fold a little bit of it in half. So we've got a yarn tail, and we're going to put it on the hook and pull it through the last half of that bobble stitch. You're going to push the bobble out, and it takes a little bit of finessing, but you're just going to, from this point till the next, crochet with the color B. So we're going to single crochet 20, and I'm going to crochet over these 2 yarn ends for the next couple stitches so that they are secured. So single crochet 1, 2, 3, and 4. And at this point I'm going to stop crocheting over the white. I kind of dropped the gray there, but it's secured enough. You can, if you want to, crochet over the white the entire way around, because we're going to switch back to white at the beginning of the next row. But for me, I find that it gets a little bit too tight. Like, it affects the shape of the head when I crochet over it the entire way. So instead what I'm going to do is when when I get to the other side, I'll just kind of pull the white yarn and then I will use it from there. And I mean, it'll take a little bit of like snipping and crocheting over ends and things like that so they're secure, but I find that it works better for me. All right, so we're going to continue crocheting along the pattern. So we're just going to finish those single crochets. All right, so now we're at row 11. You see I didn't finish off that very last half of my single crochet because I'm going to be switching colors. So I'm going to grab the white and I'm going to pull it through that stitch to finish it off. So then I'm going to single crochet 1, and I'm going over both of those ends, and then decrease. Do that 3 times. So 1 more single crochet, decrease, at this point I'm going to stop crocheting over that white yarn and I am going to snip it because it's secured on both ends, so I'm really not too worried about it. Where I don't have very much farther with the gray yarn, I am just going to finish crocheting over it so I can switch more seamlessly. So decrease. Then our last stitch is a single crochet. So once again, I'm not going to finish the stitch with white, I'm going to finish the stitch with gray. So just wrap that yarn around the hook and pull it through. And now we're going to, with the color B, we're going to decrease, single crochet 7. And for these first few stitches, I'm crocheting over the white. I'm going to drop it and continue around. Then decrease. And single crochet 7, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and decrease. So for a total of 24 stitches. So because we're switching back to the white, I'll finish off the stitch with white. Give that a little bit of a tug so I've got some more room. And we're ready to start stuffing. Well, actually, we're going to put stuffing off for 1 more row so that I can finish changing colors. Because I know this is the last row for color changing, this coming up one, and that will allow me to finish up with that and do any tying that I feel I need to do. All right, so row 12, we're going to bobble crochet, bobble stitch. And then single crochet 2. All right, so that's enough crocheting over the white. Snip that. I'll continue to crochet over the gray until it's time to switch colors again. So bobble. And single crochet. 1 and 2. And the very last stitch for our color A is a bobble. So I'm going to pull the gray yarn through to finish off the bobble stitch, and then crochet. We're going to do our decrease, and we'll single crochet 5. 1, 2, 3, drop the white, 4, 5, and decrease, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and decrease for a total of 21 stitches. So at this point, we've got, some of these yarn ends in here. We're done with the white, so we'll snip it off. And most everything has been crocheted over, so we really don't have to worry about the ends too much. But for just an added bit of security, I'm going to take these ends that I can see, and I'm just going to knot them lightly together. So I say lightly because you don't want to affect the shape of the project by pulling too hard, but you also want the knots to be secure. So at this point, we actually are going to start stuffing. So what you're going to do is you're going to take your nylon, and I get dollar store nylons because they're cheap and they stretch really well. They form to the project better than a more expensive nylon will. So you're just going to essentially take a handful of fiber fill. This one is maybe a little excessive to start with. And you're going to put it into the bottom of the nylon, like so. And then you're going to place that in the head. Then what you're going to do, so once you've got that in there, is you're going to add more fiber fill. So I'll just stretch this nylon out so it stays in place a little bit better. And then you're going to add more fiber fill. And what you want to do is you want to kind of rake the stuffing to the outside edges with your fingers, as well as just push down. So when you stuff, you kind of just like force it downward, and after that you want to kind of rake it apart. Otherwise you end up with an elongated snout, and the head is not shaped terribly well. So keep adding fiber fill till it starts to feel like it's a bit more filled out. Okay, so always take a minute and stop and look at your work, because stuffing affects the shape a lot. And I've got this flat side right here. Like this upper portion is a little bit more filled out, and then I've got this just flat, squished portion. And so when you pause and look, you can see that there are things you need to change. So I'm going to really focus on filling out that spot, you know, forcing the stuffing into that area, because stuffing affects the shape of our finished products a lot. And if you don't take that minute to stop and evaluate, you don't know what you're going to have when you know, completely finish off the project. So this is looking a lot better. There's still that one little spot. Could use a bit more stuffing and shaping, but it's definitely starting to look better. So when I like feel that with my hands, that feels pretty good for now. It's not completely stuffed, but we'll add more every couple of rows. If you fill it up to the point that it's like stuffed right to the very edge, the rows after it get a little bit hard to decrease. So you don't want to be completely stuffed right now, but to be, you know, relatively firm, I would say. So I'm pretty happy with this. So we'll continue to the next row. All right, so before we start row 13, I am going to cut off the nylon. There's a lot kind of excess here, and we probably only need like 4 inches. I'm gonna cut it maybe a little bit farther away. That way I know we're okay. But this will make it easier for me in the demonstration of being able to show and not have that being really cumbersome and in the way. So by having a little bit of excess, it also gives us room to knot it off really securely at the end of the project. All right, so let's get on to row 13. So we're going to be working with our bee yarn for the rest of the head. What we're going to do on row 13 is single crochet 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, and then decrease. And we're going to do that all the way around for a total of 18 stitches. All right, so for row 14, we're going to be single crocheting 4, 1, 2, 3, and 4, then decreasing. And we'll do that 3 times for a total of 15 stitches at the end of the row. So at the end of row 14, we're going to pull out a loop and we're going to add some more stuffing. So get our fiber fill. Go ahead and put it in there. Once again, always remembering to rake that stuffing to the edges with your fingers. That way the head fills out and has a good round shape. If you only stuff downward, it'll be too long and it will have kind of a skinny face. Or I guess an overly skinny face. It already has kind of a skinny face. So we'll keep adding that in. And that's feeling pretty good to me. So we're going to go ahead and get started on the next row. So first we'll insert our hook back in. And then we're going to single crochet 3, 2, 3, and decrease. We'll do that 3 times for a total of 12 stitches. All right, so row 16 is going to be single crochet 2, so 1 and 2, and then decrease. And we will do that 3 times for a total of 9 stitches at the end. All right, so here we are on our last decrease for row 16. And what we're going to do now is we're going to stuff the snout, because it's kind of wimpy and puny right up here and it needs to be filled out properly. So we're going to open up the nylon and add our fiber fill. So you're going to keep adding fiber fill to the snout, of course pushing down and then also raking the stuffing to the edges of the project. So when it starts to get filled out nicely, you're going to take some time to make sure that that you kind of use your finger in a J motion or in a hooking motion, and you're going to put your finger in there and then pull the stuffing up toward the tip of the snout, because sometimes when you're just inserting it, just pushing straight to the back, like the head gets filled up but the snout doesn't. So you want to make sure that the snout is properly stuffed as well, not just the head. So it might take more stuffing than you would guess to kind of get the tip of the snout filled out, but you want to make sure that it's really well stuffed. So work all of it in there as best you can. All right, so now we're ready to move on to row 17. So we'll put our hook back into the project, and this is the last row. So what we're going to do is simply single crochet 1 and then decrease. And so this really starts to this closes off the project almost entirely. So when we finish with this round, we'll have 6 stitches left in the row. All right, so last one, single crochet and decrease. All right, so at this point you're going to cut a 4 to 6 inch yarn tail. So pull out the running stitch marker, and then we just need to add the tiniest bit more fiber fill behind this last row that we've made. So this can be a little bit harder because we only have 6 stitches in that very last row. So it'll take a little bit of doing, but you just need to add that last bit so that the nose is really filled out well. And once again, you can see I'm making sure that I bring that stuffing to kind of the edges of the project, not just straight down. So I also kind of, hook my finger in there to stuff, fill out the project. So when it feels like it's good and filled, and the snout looks good, we're going to knot off the nylon. Just tie a nice easy knot right here, pull it tight so it's really secure. And then I'm just going to stuff this excess nylon into the project to help finish fill out the nose. Then what we're going to do is we're going to gather the remaining stitches. So we'll just move that, and we'll take our 5.5 millimeter hook and we're going to insert it underneath the outside loop of each of the remaining 6 stitches and pull it through. So just go around gathering all of the 6 stitches. So 4, 5, and 6. And we'll go ahead and pull it tight. And that's the end of the project. So now we just have to knot it off. And you can knot it in any way you'd like. I just kind of create a series of loops and then knot it off. And then when that's done, you're going to weave the yarn ends in the project. All right, weaving it in. All right, so there we have it. This is the end of the head. What I'm doing right now is I'm just going to shape it a little bit with my hands, because shaping it with your hands on the outside kind of also will affect the fiber fill on the inside and can make for a better finish.